Next item of discussion, closed in the packet is a letter written to Honorable Ken Richardson and Alleghany County Commissioners. It says, Commissioner Richardson, First Baptist Church of Sparta will be re-roofing our building this fall 2011. We're asking Alleghany County to waive the landfill charges for disposal of roofing debris. Thank you for your consideration. It's from Warren Taylor and Mike Rowe. Before I turn it back over to the board, I guess if the board chooses to proceed with this, I guess this is a follow-up from the previous request that was from Presbyterian Church, in which they had re-roofed a portion of their facility. What has occurred in the past, this board has always dealt with these issues on a case-by-case basis, and you generally gave relief for people who were tornado victims, fire victims, things of that nature. If the board chooses to proceed with this, then I guess what I'm going to ask is this something that you're going to create as a policy? If so, do you limit it to just roofs, or do you stop at this point? I believe at this point it requires further discussions, at least some direction to me in regards to these issues for the next time I'm approached.
Discussion with the board.
I remember the last one with the Presbyterian Church, and I think it passed 5-0. I've thought about it a little bit, and this is not an original thought. I would like to see what some of the other board members think about the possibility of limiting these waivers for roofing only. If there's any discussion along those lines, that would be something I'd like to see, and I would make that motion with that particular stipulation, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We have a motion. Is there a second to that motion? I'll second that motion. It's out on the table now for discussion. Don, is this kind of what you were talking about? If this motion passes and limits it to the last time we counted, there's between 70 and 100 churches in Alleghany County.
You know, I think you got to do one or two things. Either you just sort of stop it now and say, look, we're stopping now. It just so happens you felt correct or right with the Presbyterian Church for whatever reason, or we got to start having discussions, because churches do roofs, they do additions, they do. I mean, I'm not trying to single my church. You know, my church built a new facility and paid the entire dump fee. I mean, when they constructed the new facility. So, at what point do we, do you limit it or do you stop it? I mean, I think this is open for any discussion in that line, because I just need to know, because I do believe we will start getting approached more and more.
And, my feeling too, if we do it and, we do it for the churches, then, we should do it for all nonprofits. And then if we're doing it for nonprofits, are we discriminating against the for-profit business? So I really, at this point, I don't, see approving this and establishing a policy. I just can't support that, for those reasons. Because I think, we're opening a big can of worms, and, establishing a policy that I think is going to lead to further problems down the road.
Madam Attorney, do you have a voice on that?
I think you've already established a precedent when you did it for the Presbyterian Church, and unless you can distinguish this request from that one, I think you're going to be accused of being arbitrary and capricious in your ruling with this. So, I mean, I think the can of worms has already been opened.
I understand that, and that was a portion of the roof, and this is an entire church and fellowship hall.
And I agree with the county manager that at this point you need to establish some sort of guidelines to go by. Either you limit it to a certain dollar amount for, like you say, all nonprofits, or.
I mean, but just because you do one thing doesn't mean. I'm just asking. Doesn't mean, let's say a new board comes on, doesn't mean you can't change. Boards change policy and rules all the time.
That's true, if there's some reason for doing it, but the other request was just a couple of months ago. It's not like you're, well, I guess you are in a different fiscal year. That's about the only difference I can see, and with no more information than what we have, I don't know if this is a much larger request than the other.
And I do not know, I do
I
know.
have no idea what size the other one was.
The previous one was a partial roof, and I do not know if this full roof or the, I just think if the board's gonna, if we're gonna go down this route, I think we need to go ahead and start establishing policy. I mean, if you're willing to go down and start looking at this, then I think we need to get into a discussion about what the policies are. I totally disagree with it. I think you have set precedent, but I also think a board can change its mind too. Okay. That doesn't mean you're not going to be accused, doesn't mean you're not going to take heat over it, doesn't mean you're not going to take a negative view on it, but you make rules every year and you can change rules every year.
Other discussion, board, churches, or taxes?
In the past, we have exempted, like you said, people like insurance.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a financial
Natural
burden
disasters.
to the point where I've been instructed to do, say, the tornadoes, I literally talked to the insurance agents and asked them, you know, you have to be careful because I can't get into certain private things, but I even asked them if they're underinsured or, I mean, the last tornado, the tornado that we had, we actually did have one insurance company that basically said, no, we're gonna cover it. It's part of the policy, and from that perspective, those bills were not relieved because the insurance company said that they were fully insured. Everybody else that were underinsured basically got relieved.
Commissioner Smith, would you be willing to withdraw your motion until they can come back with additional information?
I would.
What I'm going to do is table this and bring us back, you and Donna, bring us back some information, something that we could establish, some guidelines that we could, before we move forward with this.
I mean, that's what the board chooses to do. Next item of discussion, closed in your packets, is it's a letter from former Commissioner Randy